Hello and welcome to the Smells Like Identity Hygiene podcast. Today we have Lindsay with us. Lindsay is a IT security director specializing in mergers and acquisitions, and I've been so looking forward to this conversation with you, Lindsay, because I think it's the kind of thing that we talk about a lot with our customers, and it's one of the things that drives a lot of security initiatives, whether it's cleanup or just kind of figuring out where everything belongs. And to some extent, if we think about the genesis of Sphere, it actually came from an acquisition and a merger. So to start off with, can you tell us a little bit about your history and your role and the work that you do?
Yeah, sure. I started out going to school and getting a undergrad degree in the computer science field and a master's degree in information systems, like manager of IT people, let's say. And with that, I started out as a developer. So I started out writing code, doing internships in my first job, writing C++, Java, JSP, Cold Fusion, JavaScript, that kind of stuff. Did that for a while, kind of realizing that that's probably not the right path for me long term. I knew how to do it, was good at it, but also always had a healthy paranoia, so that's a great place for security. And at the same time, didn't want to sit in the room all day long with developers talking about Star Wars, just wasn't my thing long term. So started exploring within the place that I had worked at the time, the security side of things. And so basically that's where, I got into being in security. And that was in a DoD environment. So that was, 20 some years ago, where DoD still had a pretty good security program back then. One of the only places that already had to have really good security. So that's where I started out. And then had stayed in security for several years and had been within DoD, done some retail, and have been in financial services. So over the course of 21 years or so, been in tech and then been in cyber, for the past 17 or 18 years. So have just seen a plethora of variations of security system setup, how it operates between the different kind of industries.
And so right now, your role is to essentially work with organizations that your organization acquires to make sure that they can safely be integrated, right? Can you tell us a little bit about what is the difference between when you were a security professional working for the security of an internal organization versus what you do now where you are going into another organization kind of into the unknown, right? You have nothing, you don't know anything about what they do, what processes they have. Can you tell us about the differences between kind of that aspect of what you do today versus when you were in kind of a traditional internal security team?
Yeah. So when you talk about an internal security team, typically you've got each area that is a domain of security. You've got the IAM programs, you've got your, data protection programs, you've got your security engineering and architecture programs. You've just got to go across all the domains, and the main goal is to be operationalized and to run smoothly. Try to automate processes. Try to make everything a little better, right? You might have some reorganizations, but for the most part, you're just creating efficiencies with what you already have. How do you do project intake, run everything, secure things, work with the technology to just embed security from the beginning? And that's just the traditional model. From an M&A perspective, your goal is to go into this environment that's basically an untrusted third party. And your goal is to first know what the objective is of the business. So, what the business needs, what the business wants, what they think they're purchasing. You have to go into that environment from a security mindset, and you have to understand what it looks like today. Do they have any and any threat actors that are currently in their environment. So you have to, look at their hygiene. Like that's always really important to do right up front before you even go in there. After you've done that, you've got to go in and you've got to do discovery. You've of course talked to the teams, but you have to go in and you have to say, what does this actually look like in reality? What can we do to harden it as it is? So we have to be able to go in, we have to harden that environment. We have to figure out what kind of hardening we can do. So if the systems you have in your regular corporate environment are, state of the art types of systems that are enterprise grade, and you go into this other environment which could have everything, anything you just think of, it could be any kind of environment. It could be a little small company, it could be a large company. And so you might not have standards that you have from your company. You might kind of go in and everything is a unique snowflake. So you're looking at this, living in the gray area, determining, well, what can you harden? What can you do? And you do what you can in those environments, with the end goal of being to secure it and harden it as much as you possibly can while it's sitting out there in an interim state, with the end goal of being integrating into your environment, if that's the goal, or creating some kind of a new environment for them long term, just depending on what the business goal is. That's all a giant holistic program that has to run, and it's completely outside of the regular security protocols. This not as in policy, but as in the regular operational side of your security teams. This is just a whole different work set.
It's fascinating because you actually have to understand the business side of things, right? What is the long-term goal of this acquisition? Like you said, is it just merely we're just going to take the people, take the processes, and bring it into the larger corporate entity, or are they going to operate independently, but they are still part of that umbrella larger organization, and they need to be safe, right? Because they can potentially compromise the larger organization, which is fascinating, and that does seem like a lot different than doing traditional security, where you always have to keep in mind the goals of the business, but ultimately the goal is protect the firm. Protect what you know. Yeah. And the other thing that I find really interesting about what you do is that you are very much going into the unknown. You talked about discovery, and discovery is hard enough when you're dealing with a known entity that you worked in, an environment that you worked in, people that you could talk to. But I got to imagine discovery going into the complete unknown is a lot more difficult.
Yeah, it is, especially when so, if you have a larger organization that's regulated, they're going to have more requirements that they're already following. They might have business owners. They might know who owns various applications. So it makes it a little easier because you can ask people, hey, you're the owner. Who should have access to this? What does this look like? Does it have multi-factor on it? You can start to ask questions. But if it's a smaller company, there may not be business owners. And so, you kind of are running up against really trying to understand it on your own and trying to get a good picture. Ideally, having some tools out there that can do some discovery in a more automated way, that can pull data back for you, that can give you views of it, to be able to build out that end discovery state so that you can move forward with whatever you need to do to harden.
You talked about ownership, and ownership we know is critical, right? To especially when it comes to affecting change. Can you tell us a little bit about the role of identities when it comes to this type of work that you do, when it comes to whether you're analyzing a potential acquisition target, or possibly the acquisition's already happened, but now you're trying to make sense of that environment. Can you tell us a little bit about what role do identities play in that?
Sure. Yeah. So identities are one of the biggest, if not the biggest, item you're going to be looking at. It's very important within the acquisition. An identity is what's going to give somebody, a threat actor, access into the environment. It's going to give everyone their accesses. And so as you're looking at it, and one of the very first things you do is you're talking to that company and you're asking them how do they do their identities today? How do they do their provisioning? How do they do their deprovisioning, right? So when somebody's leaving the company, how do they remove them? How do they remove them from systems that may not be through Active Directory or through, a federated identity platform? So, when you have SaaS apps, how do you treat those? Do you have MFA on those? You're asking so many questions to just understand the security profile of their identities today, with the objective of thinking about threat actor vectors to get into the systems first, because you just bought this company. So from the business aspect, you want to make sure that they keep the value of what they just bought. And then you're looking at this and you're trying to kind of paint the picture to understand prioritization of what you need to harden, whose accesses you may want to remove, if there's anything that's externally facing, appliances that may have accesses there that they did out of ease that we wouldn't want that, and so you start to look at those and remove those first. You try to figure out exactly what the ideal access structure should look like on an interim basis. And then for the integration, you need to know, so that way if you're moving anything over, who should be getting access to that. A lot of times you're going to start over, but you at least have an idea. I would say with the accesses, it's just you could get anything. You can get so many different areas there that it's just really important that that's a main focus up front.
And I mean, and when we talk about acquisitions, we usually think about acquiring a smaller organization. But it's possible that an acquisition could be a fairly large, fairly complex organization where some of the challenges could be not necessarily just they don't have processes in place, but they have their own processes and they don't maybe meld with the larger corporate processes. Can you tell us a little bit about, and we did talk about some of the challenges with your role. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the biggest challenges with your role, the kinds of things that keep you up at night?
Yeah. I think some of the biggest challenges is ensuring all the players strategically are on the same page. It's not necessarily a challenge, but it's an iterative, very important process just to ensure that everyone is. And I mean everyone from the technology space, everyone from the business space, everyone from the security space. As things evolve, just like if you were to flip a house and some of it may be sight unseen, you might not know there was a crack in the pool in the backyard, and it's evolving. And so you have to ensure that you are iteratively, weekly, making sure we're all on the same page, we're touching base to ensure that everybody's objective is the same. And what we need to harden, everyone's on the same page. These are the items that we feel are important, but also at the same time where you don't break the business. So I say that would be the second part of that is always a challenge, is that the business just determined they wanted to buy this company. So they buy it, but you don't, as much as you want to secure it, you don't want to break their business. You don't want to break their business processes. A good example would be, let's say your corporation has a SOC, right? So you have a security operating center, and you have a normal protocol where when you see something that could potentially be abnormal behavior because you've done a baseline, you go through and you shut that system from being on the internet with your heuristics tools, and you take a triage of it. So if you followed that same protocol within an acquisition space, because let's say you did deploy your heuristics tools there as well, it may be normal behavior within that acquisitions environment, and it may be a system that does a special task that's running the business. And so essentially a SOC unknowingly could take down a business. So you have to build out, and that's part of the challenge, is these special processes across the board. That's just one example of 100. in the beginning, where you know that this environment is different and here's the way that the business could be broken if we follow our normal protocols. And so with, part of the discovery is, what are their normal protocols? How are they different from our normal protocols? And what do we have to do different within our normal protocols, for this company, essentially breaking automations and, protocols in order to keep it running smoothly for X amount of time.
So it's very interesting because your role is specialized in these acquisitions, and I've spoken to lots of organizations that attempt to do this with internal people, right? The internal security person who is responsible for the day to day, and then they're told, by the way, we just purchased X organization, go figure it out. And it does feel like it does need to be a specialized role, someone who understands, can almost like a SWAT team, right? It's kind of the way that I envision you and your team going in, knowing what to look for, understanding what can break, what cannot break, what can we do, how much can we enforce, how much can we not, in order to ensure that there's a safe acquisition, right? Would you say that over the course of your career, from when you started specializing in acquisitions, but just in general from a security perspective, has the role changed over the years? And if it has, how?
So, yes and no. The core values, the core objective of the role has not changed. It's assess the company that was just bought and ensure that it's secure right up front. What's the integration plan? And then it's, making sure that it's secure through the integration as well. That's not changed. The pieces and parts that change and evolve over the last, I would say, 6 years, is the technologies. So when you start to talk about things like generative AI, just the AI functionalities that start to be embedded in SaaS products. You've got people moving to the cloud. You've got people moving to multiple clouds. You've got people using Google, or 365. And then those are evolving and changing. Those have more features and functionalities. You've got CASB functionalities that are now there. So you've got more options for how you want to scan your data. Where is the data, right? You've got tools like Box and Dropbox, where people can sign up for personal accounts, use their credit cards that are harder to find, or you can have enterprise licenses for those as well. I think the evolution is just the evolution of technology, and as that happens, you have to be able to go into that environment and understand those things. You have to know that they exist, and you have to look for them. So, okay, out of all these SaaS tools, which ones have these, AI functionalities? What are they? Are they pulling in any of the data that we just purchased? Where is it going? Where else, where is our data? I think one of the biggest things there is looking at not only the access that we already talked about, but the data, right? Who has access to that data? Where is that data that you now own as this company that's sitting, let's say, in a cloud potentially? So it's just the evolution and keeping up with that and understanding that, and building your discovery and your hardening and your vulnerability management and your integration strategies around all the new technologies that come up.
It's interesting. Every time someone talks about some new technology, whether it's AI, cloud, whatever it is, there's always the excitement about what you're going to be able to do with that technology. And then kind of the security people immediately think about, wait, here's all the ways that this can compromise us. This can be a danger. This could be bad, which is, the role of, as you said, when we started, the paranoia, right? As a security person, you kind of have to have that paranoia. Someone shows you the nice, shiny new object, and you immediately have to think, am I going to cut myself on that, right? Which is an interesting way to think about what we do. But that is what we do. That is our role, right? Our role is to find where there is, some kind of issue with the shiny new tools. So, Lindsay, for organizations that are looking to grow through acquisitions, let's say their plans for 2025 and beyond is they are looking to essentially just start acquiring a bunch of small, medium-sized companies and grow. What advice, and let's say that they don't have someone that is specifically in your role, what advice would you give them to kind of think about, number one, the kind of person that they have to look for that specific role, but also how should they build that out? What should they do to essentially grow through acquisitions?
Yeah. So, yeah, number one, you need to hire or train somebody that understands the phases of an acquisition, and from a security standpoint, the order of operations of the things that you need to do when you go into that environment, and then when you are going to integrate it into your environment. I mean, that would be a big piece right there. It's hard. It is hard to find somebody in security, number one, and then to find somebody that can do M&A in security is even harder, but that would be ideal. The second piece is that I think before you start, understanding strategically what the business is looking to go after in terms of what they're wanting to buy. So, for example, if they want to buy an ed tech or a fintech company, just kind of putting in perspective, they're probably smaller and scrappier, where they may be all in the cloud and, may or may not have all the shiny security tools already there. So kind of build that out up front, in your mind. Maybe do a tabletop of what does that look like, and what would you want to have done ahead of time. Do you want to have a cloud environment ready to go so that you can try to port it over? Would you port it over into your environment without doing all the code scanning and remediation first and just contain it? Or would you want to do that first in their environment and then bring it over? You just start to map out the way that you would operationalize this. You would want to look at all of the other pieces. So another example would be if you plan to look at buying a company that's in another country. Do they have GDPR requirements? Can your system handle the privacy requirements that you would need to be able to comply with? Could you, if they opt out of being monitored, would you have the ability to do that if you have that in there today? You just start to look at that and say, am I prepared? What are the things I need to be prepared for? Start modeling that out with, tabletop exercises or use cases, business cases, personas, and just make sure you have a plan. I would say secondary to that, things that people sometimes don't always think about or maybe forget about is that support model that all of the teams have to have during the transition period. So there still has to be a team that's in supporting that, we could say, quote, legacy environment, not just security. Some of this could be technology teams that affects security teams. So you have to have a network person. If you use the people that are in that environment already, let's say it could be outsourced with an outsourced tech team, but let's say it was an in-source tech team. Are you going to rely on the people that work at that legacy environment to continue to do the operational work? Are you going to pair them with somebody from the larger company so that if by chance they leave, which in many cases they start to look for other jobs, that the legacy knowledge isn't all gone in the meantime, especially if that environment is going to stay around for a while. So the support model, understanding the support model and the ifs, if this happens, who's going to support it? Are we prepared for that? And even mocking out tabletop exercises of an incident, or how would we respond? It doesn't even have to be an incident. It could just be an outage that like, it doesn't have to be a security incident. It can just be a tech incident. What would we do? Do we have the people with the right accesses into that environment? Can they get in there? Does the SOC have access into that environment if they need to? All of those kinds of questions up front you want to plan out before you even start, so you're not scrambling at the last minute.
Makes sense. So we've reached the portion of our podcast where, as always, we do a bunch of serious questions and then we end on a fun question. So I thought for today, since you are our merger and acquisition expert, I would talk about mergers of food. So do you have a food that most people might think is weird, like a combination of foods that most people might think is weird, but you actually really, really like?
So I don't think I have anything really crazy, but I don't think I've seen this by anybody else in my life. So I like honey and ketchup mixed together with chicken. It doesn't have to be chicken nuggets, it could be any kind of chicken. But I like to mix those two together with probably a ratio of more honey than ketchup. And I just really like that. I just don't know know anybody who else who likes that.
It's so weird, and we talked about this earlier, and to me it feels like that should be a thing, right? There's like spicy ketchup, there's spicy mayo, effectively, I mean, Russian dressing is just mayo and ketchup, and then there's spicy honey. But why hasn't someone just combined ketchup and honey? It just seems like they would naturally go together. They're sweet, savory. It kind of has that combination.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
know. I'm not sure. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it in the stores, but I will say I don't like them mixed together thoroughly. I like to have a
oh,
swirl of the
oh,
ketchup
interesting.
and the honey. So you can't necessarily accomplish that in a bottle because it's too mixed together.
So, okay, so what does the swirl give you?
It's just a hint of ketchup, but it's not completely engulfing the honey. It
Oh,
still
see,
gives you a swirl. It's like ice cream if you had vanilla with a swirl of chocolate, but if you mix the two together, it would just taste like chocolate.
so this is fascinating. So it's more honey than ketchup. So it's more like ketchup in honey as opposed to honey ketchup, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And so you put a couple of drops of ketchup in like honey and just don't mix it all together, just swirl it.
Yeah.
So as you're dipping a chicken nugget or chicken strips, you get mostly honey with like spots of ketchup.
Yeah, exactly.
I absolutely have to try that. That sounds fascinating. See, for me, it's also ketchup. It's ketchup and rice. I love ketchup and rice. I don't know why people find that weird. Even like fried rice. Put some ketchup in fried rice. I think that sweetness just kind of balances the whole meal out. The other thing that I was thinking, if you've ever been to Disney, they have I think in Animal Kingdom in Florida they have um, a jelly donut with pulled pork, and I think there's coleslaw on it too. And it sounds really weird, but if you think about it, some sweetness goes well with pork, like applesauce
Yeah.
with
Hmm.
pork, and the jelly donut as you're eating it, you realize you've made a grave mistake, but it tastes really good. So you'll go through it, but I will pay for this later, but it's like it's delicious, but I'm gonna regret my decision a little bit later.
Yeah. No, I can see that. I definitely can see that because you've seen like bacon on donuts. Like I've seen it,
Oh
in
yeah.
Dunkin' Donuts where they sprinkle bacon on like a maple donut, right? I don't know if they're filled with anything, but conceptually, I mean it's the same thing. Pulled
You
pork.
know, I've had bacon, chocolate dipped bacon at Hershey Park, and I thought I would love it, but somehow I did not. Maybe it was the chocolate.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've ever had chocolate dipped bacon.
No. I
It's two
have
great
not.
things. So you would think two great things together should make
Yeah.
it better. But yeah, no, no, I did not care for it at all.
Huh.
So Lindsay, this has been phenomenal. This is fantastic. I know a lot of people are interested in this topic, whether it's because they are growing through acquisition, or they're the poor soul that we talked about that gets tapped on the shoulder and says, "Hey, instead of your day job for the next few weeks, the next few months, I need you to go figure this out." And it is, I think, very much something that you need a very specific set of skills to accomplish. So it's been great having you on, and definitely whenever you want to come back, just let me know, and we'd love to have you back.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Smells Like Identity Hygiene. Smells Like Identity Hygiene is a production of Sphere Technology Solutions, and our producer is Matthew Klink. Until next time.